I got performance reviews coming up for the first time. The days of just all of the inmates running the asylum, no. We got benchmarks that we got hit, and if we don't hit them, I got to try to figure out how to get to it. In the event that the numbers like stagnate at some point and the boat is getting heavy, tough decisions will have to be made.
Joe Budden warns his cast that he is doing performance evaluations and also tells them that he is going to be watching them and that he might be making changes. Yes, on the last two episodes of the Joe Budden podcast, Joe Budden has laid the groundwork for him to evaluate the cast. Now, it's something that's always been done, but this seems to be a formal warning about the process beginning. Now, I do think evaluations are interesting because that means that paperwork is happening. Yeah, Ian and Joe probably used to have informal conversations with Ish about talking more on air. The same with Melissa Ford. But I do wonder at this point, is there going to be real paperwork? Is there going to be a Google Doc where folks are sat down and met with for a meeting and members of the show share out what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are? Will there be raises assigned based on performance evaluation? It's something Mark Lamont laid out in that exchange.
If we exceed the benchmarks,
because that's the other part.
You get a big hug. What do we?
I set benchmarks pretty high.
And it's funny the way this is coming. This is coming on the heels of a lot of strife for the cast. It's also coming on the heels of the $20 million revelation that the network is making. So this is interesting timing. And we all know Joe loves to make changes at the end of every year. Remember when he brought on Flip and Melissa Ford? That was at the end of, I believe, 2022. And then he brought on Mark. That was at the end of 2024. And he also brought on Ian and Jay Wan, but that didn't necessarily pan out. But now, who could this policy really affect? I think the biggest person that it could affect is Melissa Ford. Melissa Ford missed the last episode, and it was after the day of the Patreon where she left because she seemingly was offended by the addiction question. And Melissa Ford has had a rough 2025, but she has largely been protected because of the attention she brings to the show. I mean, for all of the warts, for all of the problems Melissa Ford has, her ability to generate conversation is undeniable. Women hate her. Men hate her. But there's also the women who love her and the men who love her. Plus, she has gone viral a few times, maybe for all the wrong reasons. But I think Joe is growing tired of the dialogue that she doesn't bring to the show. Yes, she gets dogpiled, but when she's given runway to give away some of her thoughts, it's often left short and lacking. I know there's going to be a lot of Melissa Ford fans mad about that, but that's just the God's honest truth. Her facilitation strategies on the podcast is severely lacking. And now the fans of Melissa Ford often try to deem away all criticisms of her as red pill thoughts. But if Melissa Ford was good, I'd say it. I did give her credit by how I outlined that she goes viral and she's able to do her job in a way that's professional. That's the credit I always give her, right? Believe it or not, for being a baddie, Melissa Ford, because there's some baddies out there that aren't professional. They believe that their looks are what drives their value and don't put the work in, arrive late, don't want to do it. And sometimes the money from podcasting isn't enough, so they start to meander and not want to be down with the show. And now, who is the other person that might hurt when it comes to performance evaluations? Ish. Yes, Ish suffers a lot from the critique that Melissa Ford faces, where he doesn't necessarily speak and he looks disengaged and disinterested depending on the topic. I do think that Ish is a tough listen sometimes, even though he represents someone that the fans love. And after that, we have to look at Flip. Yes, Flip is beloved by Joe because he brings that content over everything appeal and is able to bring the energy up at the drop of a dime, but he is unprofessional. He often arrives late, asks not to be on certain shows, but then wants to be on other shows. And he has essentially admitted that he's useless when it comes to interviewing because he doesn't have the attention span to take part in the interview. But now we have Mark Lamont, who I think this guy's going to manipulate this evaluation system. He already is. And we'll see if he's able to get a bump in pay. And I would say if Mark Lamont's getting evaluated, I don't think he owns any equity in the company. I know there's some people saying like, that's part of the storyline, guys. Joe is not giving none of them people up their equity of the Joe Budden network. I'm sorry, y'all. That's not happening. The closest who ever got to that was Rory and Maul. And they weren't even people who actually had equity. They had profit sharing splits. Parks ain't getting it. Mark ain't getting it. Ish ain't getting it. Ice ain't getting it. None of those folks was there from day one. And the only person who is going to get it, if he is getting it, now I think he's getting it, is Ian Schwartzman, because Ian took shorts, allegedly, based on what he said. He wasn't taking any money when he felt like he could have. So that's how it's going to play out. Mark is not no partner. He's not getting equity. And I dare anybody in the comments to say that he is. Parks, we'll see how he does with performance evaluations. I feel like it was a step in the wrong direction this year for Parks as he arrived late to the show. And he's been marginalized somewhat now that the show isn't at his house. I do believe that he can be replaced. Well, I do believe anybody on the show can be replaced outside of Joe. And even Mark could be replaced, but I mean, it would be tough without Mark. It would be a long, tough listen if Mark wasn't there. Like there's times when Mark isn't there that I don't really want to listen or I'm not as motivated. But everybody else, y'all can go. We can find other people. We can get Keno. We can get Ashley. We can get even Ian Dunlop. We can bring back Jaywan, even though I don't think Jaywan's that good. We can still bring him back for an episode or two as we find a permanent replacement. But let me know what you think about Joe making these stern warnings. He also introduced new metrics about trying to get an Emmy. Now, I think the Emmys have podcast awards now. And if Joe's able to get an Emmy before all of his peers in the industry, then that could be a really big deal. So we'll see. I don't know what type of metrics there are for winning the Emmy because a lot of that stuff is just relationships. Like, are you able to cater towards the relationships of the industry? And that would be brand new territory for the podcast medium, especially someone from this landscape, the urban podcast landscape, to win something as prestigious as an Emmy from audio. Oh boy, sky's the limit. And, you know, when you win an Emmy, I know a lot of people don't think it's important. Other people might want to give you a deal just to be associated with your brand. And I think if Joe feels like he needs to do evaluations, he probably doesn't like what's going on. Joe is not that proactive to me. He usually waits for things to go wrong and then reacts. So right now, he's laying the groundwork to properly get rid of people. So that way, when he does, he has all the paperwork and all the tracking. Oh, I did a performance evaluation. I told you to get better, but you didn't get better. So I'm going to have to phase you out. And let's see if people start potting a little bit different, knowing that their performance is being evaluated in a more substantive way that isn't the Reddit folks or the Twitter folks or the Patreon comments. There's going to be real institutionalized evaluations of folks. And it's funny that Ian introduced that whole bit of evaluating people on the behind the scenes, but now it's really happening, y'all. With that said, I want to end this video by saying, please tell me what you think about Joe's stern warning of performance evaluations actually happening and what implication that has for the staff. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.